Wake up world! This is Aussie59. This is my third show under this title. So I think I'll explain the title to you. Okay, Sunday is the day where I used to sit down and put together what I was going to be doing the next week. Okay? So, Sunday drive. I found that to be the day that drove me forward in my life. That was the day that I started planning to do things for the next week. I went week by week because I was given a very short time to live for my life. I was only supposed to live to be 28. I'm 55 now. But, so I figured, okay, I don't drive. And it's coincidental. Plus also, I don't know, I relax when I play driving games. I've been doing that since Gran Turismo, actually before Gran Turismo, but Gran Turismo got me into it. But so it's just coincidental that the videos will be, most of the videos will be driving games. But the drive, the Sunday drive I'm talking about is like, let's lay down what we want out of our lives and get what we want. Okay? Now, that's explaining what the show is about. I want people to look at stuff and research and look for information, not just listen to the mainstream media. Go to the internet. If you don't have the internet, go to the library, go to the internet. You got phones. If you're viewing me, you've got to have something. So just do the research yourself on what's going on. This week, there was a headline that kind of caught my attention, okay? And it kind of carries a little bit into what the last two shows touched on about freedom of speech and stuff like that, okay? Now, there's this buzz going around, some big shot from, used to be an NBC, now he's the head of the BBG, broadcast, board of broadcast generals or something, whatever it is, has to do with government news, information, whatever. He was the head of NBC News, so that tells you where he basically comes from, and he's lumping his competition into the terrorist category. But that's the thing that has me, like, is news terror? Now, is information terror? Now, when you look at it, Russia invaded Crimea. That sounds like, yet there were no bullets fired. That sounds like propaganda. It actually sounds like a falsehood, really, but still propaganda, because propaganda is a point of view. This is getting confusing here. Now, if you remember the Malaysian airline incident, the U.S. government depended on social posting to get their information to blame Russia. So publicly blaming that could be a terrorist act towards Russia. So yeah, maybe news is terrorism. Maybe news is. After all, take a look at this week's events, right? We had a weather occurrence in North America. That's what I'll call it. Because still too early in the century to be calling it the storm of the century, because last century we made the mistake of doing that in 26, and then we had the 79, right? Which I think was 5, 10 times worse than what hit this time. So, in California, it's 100 times. But, so is news terror? Or, well, we had Victoria Nuland saying that they're not worried about it because of the small viewership. So, the government doesn't think it, but their machine put it out there. Right? This is a government agency, which the State Department claims independent, but we know about the independence of the media in the West, not just the States. We've been getting a lot of false information about what's going on the other side of the planet, up here in Canada too. After all, what got me really interested was that the Russia invading Crimea. I watched the news footage on CBC there, and like people running up to tanks. Hey, guess what? If you're running up to the tank, I don't think you're being attacked. You know? And if you look closely, you can tell the difference between the tears of fear and the tears of happiness. And there were a lot of elderly people that had a lot of tears of happiness when Russia walked in there. They didn't want to happen in Crimea what happened in Kiev. I don't blame them. Is that an invasion? No. Crimea had its own parliament. Crimea invited them. What was an invasion was what happened in Kiev. That was an invasion. Giving out sandwiches, it wasn't cookies. That's a good thing that Victoria Nuland cleared that up. Wow. You know, gives the people who are having difficulty feeding themselves the idea that the American public is going to feed them. That's what this is about, yeah. Join our world dictatorship. Oh, well, maybe I'll become a terrorist, as far as the news is concerned. This broadcast, my show might end up becoming one of those things, I hope. Not. Oh, well, maybe. Because if I do, then that means people are listening to what I have to say, my opinion, which is good, because it always feels good to think that your opinion means something. But there was something else that went on this week that wasn't covered very strongly in much of the media. And that was the important point that the Russian president did not get invited to, I apologize if I pronounce it wrong, Auschwitz, or whatever the name of that concentration camp in, not concentration camp, come on, elimination camp, disposal unit in Poland. Okay? From the Second World War. Well, 70 years ago this week, they were liberated. And the majority of the forces there, they've liberated them, was the Red Army of Russia. Okay? And they didn't invite Russia. I don't know if it's over what's going on in the Ukraine and stuff like that. But they invited the Ukrainian president. And Ukraine was involved in the rounding up of the Jews in the Second World War. They were involved in sending people to that death camp. That's what it was. It was a death camp. Okay? And now they had a blizzard to overlook the point that this didn't take place 70 years ago. If you take a look at the history of the Second World War, without Russia's cooperation and alliance with the Allies, it would be a fascist world today. The Nazis would not have been beaten without the Russians. Even though there were Russian Nazis, there were non-Soviet troops. They were not Nazi. There were non-Nazi troops. There was the Red Army, which was not a fascist army. And to not invite the president of the country that helped liberate actually was the main contributor to liberating that particular camp was an insult. There were survivors. Check it out on the internet yourself. There were survivors that made comments about it was Russia, not the US, that liberated them. Okay? Pay attention to what's being said. We know the government in Kiev is fascist. If we don't, then we aren't paying attention to what is going on, and we haven't listened to what they have actually said. And Fatherland Party, that sounds interesting. Whoa. Remember, president to prime minister. How many democratic societies can you lose one head seat and end up in another one? Good one. That was a coup government, though. So, the question is news terrorism? Well, maybe the corporate crier is shouting terrorism. Maybe some of the town criers are, but I think we get more clarity from our town criers. I got away from the cable networks 8 years ago because of the bullshit that was on them. And I've been forced to go back and look at the major medias because of what's been going on in the world, wanting to get clarity and stuff like that. Get as clear a message out to people as possible. But this week, let's try to figure out if news is terrorism. Because if it is, then guess what? All parties are guilty of it because they all have news. And they all have their side of the story. Now, it's our job as the public and the voters to determine who's telling us the truth. And then, remember, we have the power at the voting poll. And our job is to try keep our governments in line. So, let's not tie up the freedom of speech issue and restrict speech like they're doing in so many situations now. There's been a lot of invasion of privacy by the governments all over the world. It's coming out there. So I'm going to just let you go right now and say, have a cup of coffee, smell the roses. Remember, we live among the fertilizer. Have a very good